Good afternoon and welcome to Open Mic Mondays. Another beautiful day outside. So glad that you're all here joining me today. I'm Dyanne Dumas. I'm the host of this program. And just before we get started, a couple of participation instructions to follow. Please use the chat box to communicate. You can privately message the host to submit questions or inquiries without interruption. Otherwise instructed, keep yourself on mute and respect one another and their perspectives. And this program is being recorded. Okay, so welcome again, everyone. So nice to see you, see the familiar faces. I am really pleased to once again be part of this wonderful program, so needed in times like these where we can gather around for an hour or so and we can share information about the arts, because the arts, whether it's music, dance, or poetry, theater, it brings us joy in life. And music and the arts helps us to communicate our deepest emotions, our expressions, our feelings with one another. And this program facilitates that. So every week I highlight a different artist and we share some casual conversation about their particular craft. And this week we have a special treat, something a little different than what we've been doing in the last, how many weeks has it been now? I think past 6 weeks or so. So we actually have an actor with us today. So we're going to be looking at the theater arts, which is a real treat for all of us. And we're going to learn a lot, I'm sure, in conversation with Paige. So I'd like to bring and welcome and thank Paige Matson for joining us today. Good morning, Paige.
Good morning. Good morning, Dyanne. Good morning, everybody.
So Paige, I'm just going to give them a little bit of background about you. And if I miss anything, you can fill in the gaps here. Paige is a Toronto-based actor. She has her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Performance from Ryerson University. She's also the co-founding artistic director of Panoply Theater Collective. And she's an arts educator with Ovation Performing Arts Academy. She also is the newest member of Skylark, which is a trio that I sing in. So multi-talented here. And during this pandemic, she's been able to really work a lot virtually. Even though there's been a lot of current changes with the industry, she's done a lot of virtual productions, and she'll probably tell us a little bit about that as we go along in our conversation. So welcome once again, Paige. So nice to have you. This is a real treat for us because we have been focusing on music, and I did have a local hip hop artist share with us back a few weeks ago. But other than that, it's always been about music. So now we're switching gears a little bit today and we're talking about theater. And theater is, well, sometimes theater involves music, not always. And today it's going to be you giving us some great pieces of theater. But you are an actor. And I think the first question that I'd like to address is, what made you desire or lead you into becoming an actor and heading in that field? Was there a particular event, a person, a play that you saw that influenced you to pursue this particular career?
Yeah, I'm very lucky because my parents run a performing arts studio, and I was raised going to shows all the time. I was seeing live theater and dance and music, so I was brought up with a real access to and appreciation for the arts. So I often look back and I'm like, oh, I don't know if there was one moment, because from the time I was young, I was already involved in the arts. I went to an arts elementary school, and then I went to an arts high school. And by the time I was kind of thinking about what my career was going to be, it was a bit of, well, I can't picture myself doing anything else. This is what I've always done, and this is what I love to do. And everyone who's an actor likes to joke, like, trust me, if I didn't want to do this so badly, I wouldn't be doing this, because it's a bit of a tough road to follow. But I think what really sparked for me the idea that I could do this as a career was I loved to go to the Stratford Festival, to the Shakespeare Festival. And I saw, when I was, I think, late teens, I saw Colmfior's production of King Lear. And there was an actor in it named Mev Beatty. And Mev Beatty is a Canadian theater superstar, which is an odd term. But I saw her in that production of King Lear, and she was playing Goneril. And I remember feeling this thought of like, that this is what I want to do. I want to be a part of bringing stories to life. I want to be trying to understand the human experience and sharing that with other people in this way. So I think if I had to pick a moment, it might have been that production of King Lear. Yeah.
Well, that's great to trace it back, because I think so much of those influences come to us early, especially in the arts. I remember myself going to a concert with my sister years and years and years ago. And the performer was Melanie. And I don't know if anybody even remembers her, but she was sort of, Daniel shaking his head, no. It's going to make me seem really old. But no, I was really, really young. I was probably like, I don't know, 8. And I saw her with her guitar on stage, strumming and singing. And I just knew that is what I want to do. It was the weirdest thing. It's just like, I just knew it just, and it stayed with me. And then I asked for a guitar, and I got the different kind of guitar than what she had. And I was trying to explain to my parents, no, I want the same guitar as Melanie. And they said, well, no, this is the better guitar to start on. And that was a little bit of a struggle, but eventually I got the guitar that I wanted. And now I have, more than one, obviously, but it just, it was the style and how she sang. And I think it was just how she expressed her emotion, and it just drew me in. So that's why I was just wondering if it was the same for you. So that's really great that you made that connection from that performance. That's really neat. So Shakespeare, well, that's pretty heavy duty material, if I can use that phrase. And so many young people cannot connect to that. So how did you connect to such classic literature, classic theater?
Yeah, I hear you. I think there's a lot of miscommunication when it comes to the teaching of Shakespeare, particularly in schools. There's this idea that we have to, put these old works on a pedestal, and that we can't possibly think of them and think of the writer himself as like a human, just like us. So it kind of gets taught in a way that's like, you can't, this is very alien. You can't think of it as something close to us. And I completely disagree. And I was lucky enough to have teachers and friends and fellow students who agreed with me that we were interested in examining, why have these plays endured the test of time? Why have they remained something that resonates with a lot of people? And I'm lucky enough to see myself reflected in a lot of Shakespeare's stories and Shakespeare's productions. Not everyone has that privilege, of course, but I was lucky enough to recognize myself in the shows that I was seeing of Shakespeare as well. And this sense that someone who was an ordinary person, he was a glove maker's son, could write such beautiful stories and invent new words and put into words feelings and emotions and experiences that resonate across the globe and that resonate across time. I think that really struck me as something extraordinary, that it was something that we had agreed that deserved to be shared to this day. And when I was going into university and I was studying it more in depth, I had a tremendous teacher named Ian Watson who really connected with the idea that these are words and experiences that deserve to be brought to life. They're not to be read. And I think that's where that misconnect often happens, is that people are like, oh, you have to sit down and read all of Hamlet in one sitting. And if you don't make sense of it, then you'll never understand it. But that's not true. It deserves to be brought to life by actors and by directors on a stage. So that's, I think, that where the difference was for me, that I was really happy to be involved in an active way with bringing Shakespeare to life. So much so that I did end up starting my collective, Panoply Theater Collective, when I was still in school, with the goal in mind that we want to bring Shakespeare's plays to modern audiences with modern sensibilities. Like, let's hold these stories accountable to what we want to see today. I'm not interested in the whole, tights and hats and fancy shoes. I'm interested in seeing what we want to see out of these pieces that are still around. What connects with us today, and how can we make them different if we need to? How can we change them and edit them and present them in a way that's exciting and fulfilling for audiences today? That's what I love about it.
So you take them and you modernize them. Is that
Yeah,
what you do? You sort of take,
essentially.
okay.
Yeah, we, sometimes it's as simple as, modern dress lets audiences connect with the story in a different way. We modernize them in the sense that we will edit the script, we'll cut passages, we'll rearrange things, we'll kind of go into a project with the sense of, what do we think is the essence of this story, and how can we bring that to life? And if there are parts of the original piece that we don't feel fits into that goal of ours, then we cut them or we change them, because we're not interested, like I said, in keeping that on a pedestal. We want it to be modern, and we want it to be accessible to our audiences.
It makes me think, maybe it's not a great comparison, but some of the old standards, that we have, we hear them redone today, and kids are going,
Yeah.
oh, Tony Bennett, saying, well, yeah, but he's been around, he's doing, like, that was recorded by him, and now we hear it done a little differently, and everyone
Yeah.
thinks it's a new thing, but it's really not. But let me just talk about the text, because
Yeah.
Shakespeare, you can't just read it and understand it.
Yeah.
That's really tough. So how do you get around that? Like, which leads me to the next question about when you studied at school, do they explain how to understand it? Because anyone just picking it up would just be, well, I don't really get the meaning because I'm tripping over the words. I'm tripping over the language, the phrasing.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure, a big part of my training was breaking down how to understand Shakespeare's text, and not just Shakespeare, but other classical authors as well. But yeah, with Shakespeare in particular, there's a lot of set expectations that, when what the expectations are, that he writes in a specific meter, that he writes using a certain frame of reference. So he was referencing antiquity, the classical Greeks and Roman pantheons of gods and myths. So when you know that he's referencing those things, then you can kind of reach for those. When you know that he had a certain style of theater that he was used to, and that he was both kind of working in and breaking the mold of. Like I said, he just made up his own words. He made up so many words. It's wild how many have survived, that he was the one to just be like, I'm just gonna write this new word down because I feel like it. So when you're in theater school, there are certainly experts who come in and help you break down everything there is to understand. And I'm a huge believer in the idea that that's why it's essential for people to see Shakespeare rather than to read it if you're unfamiliar with it. Because of course, if you're expected to just, like, if I was expected to pick up a math textbook, I would not understand a single thing on that piece of paper. But if there was a math teacher there explaining things to me, then I would stand a chance of knowing what's happening. And uh, that's what I think audiences deserve, is they deserve actors as interpreters. They deserve to have an effortless time watching this language that, yes, is a little odd to our modern ears. So I think good actors are able to make Shakespeare's text effortlessly understandable, even if the audience knows nothing about the rest of Shakespeare's works or anything like that. I think the actor's job is to make the words sound easy and sound understandable.
Wow, that's really interesting. What a great, well, it makes sense to me, the approach. And what a great, interesting, I mean, you're obviously very passionate about Shakespeare. And that you're bringing that, you're giving the opportunity to all people, young and mature people to understand it and appreciate something that's really timeless. That's part of our heritage. So how does that draw in? Because you obviously are involved in other things besides Shakespeare. When you are in university and you were at Ryerson studying theater, you had the classical component, right, which would be Shakespeare and other works and authors. How does that build you or develop you into being an actor? What's the important role? So I'm just going to put it into music. So I studied classical music at the conservatory, and you're more so classically trained, and then you go out and then you kind of adopt different styles of singing and you switch it up, but your foundation is classical. So was it the same way for you at Ryerson? And if so, how do you see that benefiting you as an actor in today's world?
Yeah, I love that comparison, that you have this foundation in place with your training. And that is, I think, a very apt comparison for acting as well. The more that, as an actor, as a young actor, the more you're able to understand where our theater history has been, where the style, and preferences have been, the more you can kind of use that as a base to then work with very contemporary and very modern challenges and creating new things. But I think it's harder to kind of start creating not knowing where we've come from. So I think at Ryerson, they were interested in giving us a really broad array of training. So, for example, we did Shakespeare, yes, but we did Greek work, we did clown, we did like styles from like the 30s of that kind of mid-Atlantic kind of style of very melodramatic acting. We did very contemporary like scene studies and monologues and things like that. We worked with playwrights and authors who were devising new works with us, which just means like we're creating the show as we're working on it. So I think at Ryerson, what they do well is giving us kind of a little taste of a lot of different theater practices and theater styles. So that classical base, we definitely learn early so that you have that muscle and that kind of foundation to let you work in many different styles. And that will take you very far in your contemporary studies as well. So we did voice and movement and theater history and stage combat and anatomy. They kind of were giving us kind of every tool you could want in the actor's toolkit, so that when we graduate, they're like, and now you can pick which tools you want to use and which tools you want to focus on. And clearly a big tool for me is that classical section. But they kind of like to give us a big array so that we can graduate with all the knowledge and skills that we need to make our own choices about what to focus on.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's leads us to your first piece,
Yeah.
because I'm sure our viewers are like, okay, well, let's actually hear some live theater. And can you give us an intro for it, Paige?
Yeah, brilliant. So I'll be doing a piece today from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. I'll be doing a speech of Portia's, and this is early on in the play. It's, I believe, Act 2, Scene 3, where Portia is a young noblewoman who uh, is being pursued by many suitors because of her dowry. Her father has died. Her father has left a will that stipulates the man to marry Portia must pass a very specific test. Set up in their home is 3 caskets made of gold, silver, and lead. And there's a riddle in each of the caskets. And the man who correctly chooses the right riddle and the right casket will win a portrait of Portia, which of course means that he is the perfect man to marry her. So it's a bit of an odd situation that Portia finds herself in, because she has all these suitors coming to win her hand via this riddle. There's a new suitor named Lord Bassanio, and Portia has met Bassanio and recognized something of herself in him. They haven't spent a lot of time together, but she wants to spend time with him. She wants to be intimate with him, but she can't yet. So I'm gonna perform a speech of hers where she's trying to stop Bassanio from completing the test yet. She wants him to wait and spend more time with her so that she can perhaps figure out what it is that she's feeling for this man that she doesn't know very well yet. So this speech basically starts with Bassanio on his way to complete this riddle, to get a chance at her hand in marriage. And Portia says, wait, please hold on a sec. I have some things I have to say to you. So that's what I'll be doing now.
Great, we're ready.
I pray you tarry. Pause a day or two before you hazard, for in choosing wrong, I lose your company. Therefore, forbear a while. There's something tells me, but it is not love. I would not lose you, and you know yourself hate counsels not in such a quality. Oh, but lest you should not understand me well, and yet a maiden hath no tongue but thought. I would detain you here some month or two before you venture for me. I could teach you how to choose right. But I am then forsworn, so will I never be. So may you miss me. But if you do, you'll make me wish a sin that I had been forsworn. Beshrew your eyes, they have o'erlooked me and divided me. One half of me is yours, the other half yours. Well, mine own, I would say, but if mine, then yours, and so all yours. Oh, these naughty times put bars between the owners and their rights. And so, though yours, not yours. Prove it so, let fortune go to hell for it, not I. I speak too long, but 'tis to pise the time, to eke it and to draw it out in length, to stay you from election.
Thank you, Paige. That was awesome. Such passion, and I could just see in your eyes, you were that character, which is just so awesome. How do you like I sing, and I have, I have to memorize lots of lyrics, but I've seen you perform a full production for, I don't know, 2 hours, I think it was, and you
Mhm.
had all these monologues or parts that you spoke. And I walked away, enjoying the whole production. But the question was, how did you learn all of that and retain it? Or do you just make it up because you know the language so well? You could just throw in something in there that, that thou would never know was incorrect. So just, share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, this is funny because I was talking about this the other day that I have had an easy time learning to memorize. I think I was lucky enough to be in a lot of arts programming from a young age. So I just think that part of my brain just kind of turned on very young, and I do find it easy to memorize lots of text. But for me, what makes it possible to memorize, long shows or chunks of monologues is once you, as an actor, once you understand why your character is speaking, what they're trying to achieve, what's in their way, the more you understand their action and their goals, the easier it is for the words to feel like your own. And when the words feel like your own, it feels like there's no other option but to say the words that have been written, because they're how your character is trying to get their goal achieved. So once you kind of get to that place of, I know what I want, this is how I'm trying to get it, then the words are almost effortless, because that's your tool. That's exactly how you're going to get what you need. So for me, the more I do that work, the easier it is to understand and to memorize.
So you take the text that you have to learn, you take it in character. You don't look at it and go, okay, I've got to learn this. It's just like, I become this character and now I'm learning.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a bit of both. I mean, when you're early in the process, I think you do a lot of that kind of understanding work first. Why am I saying this? Who am I saying this to? What is this for? And it's almost academic, that you're trying to think what's happening. And then, of course, I'll walk around my room, or I'll go to a park and I'll memorize. I'll memorize with my paper. And then eventually the two just kind of get married, that you know the words you have to use, because they're you don't have a choice. That's what you need to say. When you justify that for yourself as the character, I find that means that I could never forget the words now.
That's awesome. So that it locks it in.
Yeah.
That's great. And it's so nice to kind of see it stripped down, just seeing you at home doing Shakespeare, right? I mean, that was really interesting for us because we could really connect to your text, your expression. You didn't have any fancy props. It was just your face, your body, and you definitely gave us that emotion. So it was really nice to see it that way. Thank you for that. That was fabulous. You have another piece for us as well. So can you intro this?
I do, yeah. This one isn't a classical piece. It's from a contemporary play called Glass Eels by an author named Nell Lation. It's a British play, early 2000s. And I'm going to do a monologue from a character named Lily. And Lily is the daughter of undertakers. Her father and her grandfather, it's a family business, where they're undertakers in this small kind of farming community. And they're undertakers kind of in their home. And Lily is a young girl. She's lost her mother at a young age, and she lives alone in this big house that's full of death, and that's full of her father and grandfather, who are very, not very communicative people. And they have a new worker on their farm property, and Lily wants to get to know this new worker. She's never really had a lot of friends. She's never had a lot of company, people to kind of share her secrets with. And one night Lily is kind of out by the river on their property, and this new farm worker, he's out there as well. And the speech that I'll do is a speech where Lily is trying to make a connection with this person. And I think it's an interesting contrast to the Portia piece, because Portia is quite frantic and quite desperate, and Lily is not even sure herself of how she wants to say what she wants to say. So I think it's an interesting balance between the two.
And we'll see a different side of your performance as well, right? You're going to bring out different nuances, different character, different language, right? Because now we're having something, we fast forward to today's playwriter of today. So great. Okay, we're ready.
Okay, so this is a speech of Lily's from Glass Eels. I think I'm like my mother. She came down here at night, sat here, swam in there. I used to look for her. I'd find things that she'd touched. A piece of paper with her handwriting, or a shoe she'd left in the garden, or a dress she'd worn, and it hasn't been washed. I want to tell you this thing, but I don't want you looking at me while I say it. So look away. That's it. If you look at me, I'll stop. I used to think everyone had dead bodies in their house. I liked going to the room where he has to get them ready. And if we had a new one in, I'd lift the sheet from their faces. I used to think if I stood there long enough, I could make them come back to life, make them breathe again. Well, one night we had a new one in, so I went down the stairs and I took the sheet and I peeled it back, stood and stared. It was my mother. No, don't look at me. It had happened late that night and no one had woken me to tell me. That's how I found out. Her hair was still damp from the river, and I stood there and I tried to make her breathe again. I tried to make her chest move, but nothing happened. So I had to go upstairs into my dad's room. I had to get him to come with me to see what I'd done. And you know, some things that happen to you, you get them in here and you can't get them out. And I just wish you could take it out so I didn't have to remember it.
Wow. I actually have goosebumps.
The big one.
Oh my gosh. You know, the emotion. I mean, the subject is pretty heavy duty. And not that far-fetched, you know, when you think about what people do have to experience in life and things that we've all lived through. But yeah, you just brought the emotion there, Paige. I mean, we saw your eyes welling up and you're just so into that. And it's like it jumped, even though we're virtual and you're not here on this stage, which I wish every artist that I brought could be, but someday. But even though through Zoom, I could still like feel that emotion just come over me. I could feel your passion and it affected me is what I'm saying. So that was just incredible. Like, wow. And how you could transform yourself. So when you are getting into that real emotional part and you're seeing your dead mother and you're having to think, do you think of something sad to help you kind of trigger that emotion? Or is it just character being, you know, with the script? Or do you tie something in to kind of pull on your own heartstrings?
Yeah, I think honestly, it depends on the day. It depends on the show. the situation and the character. I've been in productions where there's been an emotional component. And it's interesting that people always go to the like, well, if you have to cry, that must be the hardest part of all. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you're like, yes, I'm ready to cry today, hooray. And sometimes what's harder is a love scene or a scene that's full of anger. It kind of just depends on the day and the character. For something like this, where it's a speech rather than a scene, I do find it harder than if it was a dialogue. If I have a partner to play off of, I find it easier to get out of my own head. But when it's just me and when I'm in control of a monologue that's, just a snippet of a story, there's no buildup, to that scene, then I do my best to kind of really just connect to my breath, to not anticipate my own words. If I'm sharing something, if I'm making this confession, then I'm doing my best to stay very present in each sentence, in each word. Because if I get ahead of myself, and if I'm like, remember, eventually I'm gonna mention that I saw my dead mother, then I, as the person, kind of get in the way of the character. So I do my best to kind of stay very present and very grounded, and that helps me a lot to be more honest with what the character is experiencing, so that I don't get in my own way. So I just try to stay honest to what I think and what I'm feeling in the moment.
That's incredible. What you just shared, your approach, that's so applicable to music,
Mm,
performing in music.
mm,
But
yeah.
it's also sort of I just think the bigger picture, sort of a life picture too. We got to live in the moment. So much of what we think about is what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And I've shared before on previous shows, my music and wellness, I think, especially that, where fear and stress are in the past and in the future,
Mm,
or anxiety. It's right in the present. Everything's okay. So when we just live and breathe each day, each moment, we actually are in more control and we feel calmer. It's when we're anticipating, we're already thinking about tomorrow and we're not in the moment today. So I'm just sort of philosophically bringing, what you shared to a
yeah.
different arena. But in the arts, that's a really interesting technique. So I guess in the schooling part of it, they
Mhm.
teach you all of those tools because you just taught us,
Yeah.
I think, a really cool acting tip.
I
Yeah.
think they do. Certainly a lot of my training was around my honestly breath. Breath is so huge that they teach you a lot about, using your body as your instrument, and how to let yourself kind of be open and be receptive. A lot of acting is listening, and a lot of acting is being receptive to not only your scene partners, but your audience, which is why it's so hard on Zoom when can't have that same kind of electric energy connection, um, as you do when it's live, or when you're filming with other folks in the room as well. I've really noticed that this year, that it's a new skill to be like, okay, how do I connect if I'm acting with a partner on the computer? Like, what do I have to do differently? So I think a lot of our training, yeah, is prepping us to be open and ready to receive whatever our character is experiencing, and whatever we need to kind of uh, tell their story with justice and do it well.
Yeah, definitely the new challenges of virtual everything, right? It's
Yeah.
that platform has everyone's coping, right? But the point is we're coping, we're adapting, we're changing, we're utilizing, and we're still staying connected, and we're still sharing the arts.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you have your group that you've established, the Penelope Collectives, right? So what are you doing? Are you performing virtually, and how does that work? And how do you get your audience?
Yeah, great question. Last summer, we actually did an audio drama version of Peter Pan. We're a classical theater company, and J.M. Barrie, was a contemporary of Shaw. So we took Peter Pan and we adapted it for an audio play, like a radio play. We did that last summer, where we pre-recorded the show and then released it with a full cast. Then in the fall, we did like a 45-minute version of Shakespeare's show Love's Labour's Lost, which is a show about young people living in a space together, but not being able to be intimate with each other because none of them are married or betrothed or anything like that. So we took that show and we deliberately kind of set it during the COVID pandemic. We did the show outside in masks. The whole show was kind of about how do you find connection with people when you can't get physical, when you can't get close to them? How do you do that? So that was a really neat process for us, because I've never been in a show where I've been so physically distanced from my cast members. Even that was a real interesting process. And our project for this summer is we're hoping to work with Ovation Performing Arts Academy. We're hoping to work with teens in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and presenting that outdoors as well. So we're hoping that one can still run this summer. It might run virtually, or it might run live. But it's been an interesting year for sure, with our transition from live theater to different possibilities.
Yeah, that's amazing that, that the will is there, the passion's there, right? And just finding whatever you can do to keep the arts, and to keep the arts where they should be, in front of an audience, right? Meant to share, right? I'm just wondering if there's any questions from our viewers. Does anybody have anything that you want to write in the chat? Paige has done such a great job sharing her theater skills with us. And just, I just found it so interesting to see how you take it all, from the classical training of studying Shakespeare, and then that you just bring it into the modern, and I'm sure there's so much more in between, so many other
Yeah.
eras. And do we call them genres? When music, different styles, we call genres. What do you call for theater? Different eras, I guess, right?
Eras, styles, yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's great. We're going to put up your contact information. And just before we let you go, can you just tell us, from your own experience, the impact the arts have on mental health for everyone? We always think the youth, but it's for all of us. What's the impact?
I think for me, it's clearest that the arts in many different capacities, whether it's music or fine art or performance, it really is a connecting force among all kinds of different people. People can not only be brought together physically, but emotionally. We can share ideas. We can share emotions and concepts, and that connection of a shared experience, I think, is vital to building our empathy. I think a huge part of the arts is about seeing the world as interpreted by another human being. Like seeing someone, if someone writes a beautiful piece of music or paints a gorgeous picture, you're getting a little bit of how they see the world and how they experience life. And I think then to pass that on to other people, who then share that with other people who are experiencing this kind of great link between all kinds of people. I think it builds our empathy, it builds our understanding of what it is to be human, and it broadens our horizons, which I think is essential to a healthy life, is an a willingness to look beyond what you already know and what you already understand. And that curiosity is essential. So I think the arts are essential for our lives and for our well-being. Yeah.
Absolutely. You need to be the speaker for funding, right? Keeping the funding in. We need to get you Paige Matson to do that. You were so eloquently spoken. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your talent. Um, Definitely walking away with such a greater appreciation of the theater arts. So thank you so much, Paige. We're going to post your info, your contact info once again. And thanks again. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank
Great
you for
fun.
having me. It's been such a treat.
Great. We're going to finish off the program. I pulled out a piece from uh, a classical era, and it's a very famous song. I'm sure we all know it. The melody is a traditional melody, and it's Green Sleeves. So we're going to post the lyrics and the chords, and so it's posted for the key of A minor. As you can see, I've capoed up to the 3rd fret. So I'm actually playing in C minor. I see some of you picking up your guitar and your bass. That's great. Or to sing along, the lyrics are there. And here we go. Alas, my love, you do me wrong to cast me off discourteously. For I have loved you so long, delighting in your company. Green sleeves was all my joy. Green sleeves was my delight. Green sleeves was my heart of gold, and who but my lady Green sleeves? I have been ready at your hand to grant whatever you would crave. I have both waged life and land, your love and goodwill for to have. Green sleeves was all my joy. Green sleeves was my delight. Green sleeves was my heart of gold, and who but my lady Green sleeves? Thy gown was of thy grassy green, thy sleeves of satin hanging by, which made thee be our harvest queen, and yet thou would not love me. Green sleeves was all my joy. Green sleeves was my delight. Green sleeves was my heart of gold, and who but my lady Green sleeves? I had was high, that thou my constancy mayest see, and that yet once before I die, that thou wouldst save to love me. Green sleeves was all my joy. Green sleeves was my delight. Green
but my lady green sleeves. Ooh, but my lady green sleeves. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. And have an awesome Monday afternoon. Thanks again to Paige Matson, her great, wonderful talent, so inspiring. And we will see all of you back next week for a virtual open mic program. Have a great day.